Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are asking you to temporarily abandon the most basic assumption you hold about reality.
And it really is the most basic one.
It is. It's the assumption that underpins almost every single scientific endeavor since the Enlightenment.
Right. The idea that the universe is this gigantic machine. It existed first, space, time, gravity, all the particles.
And then, after 13.8 billion years of just mechanical process, life, and then eventually our consciousness just sort of crawled out of the primordial soup.
A lucky accident.
A lucky, and let's be honest, pretty insignificant accident in the grand scheme of things.
That is the foundation of the materialist worldview.
But what if?
Eh.
What if that entire picture is backward?
Completely inverted.
What if physics doesn't create life, but rather life and consciousness are the foundational source that actually creates physics, space, and time?
It's a wild idea.
It's a very wild idea. Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we are plunging headfirst into biocentrism, a genuinely radical theory proposed by the renowned American biologist, Dr. Robert Lanza.
And our mission here is really focused, right? We need to break this down.
Exactly. We need to break down this universe-inverting idea in the simplest possible terms. We're going to examine the 7 core pillars Lanza lays out, explore the pretty wild quantum evidence he uses to back his claims.
And this is crucial. We have to spend significant time on the intense controversy this has stirred up.
Oh, absolutely. Especially among heavyweight physicists who, frankly, accuse him of quantum mysticism.
They do not hold back.
They do not. Now, this is a complex topic. It demands a mental U-turn on about 400 years of established science. But we've gathered the sources, and we're going to break down every concept using grounded analogies.
Things like rainbows, movie projectors.
Falling trees.
Yeah.
All to ensure you walk away with those satisfying aha moments without feeling, completely overwhelmed.
And the material for this, it comes from Lanza's own work, his books, but also from the robust and sometimes scathing peer critiques he's faced.
So where do we start? What's the context for such a radical theory even being necessary?
Well, what's fascinating here is the sheer necessity of biocentrism, at least from Lanza's perspective. He is stepping directly into what is often called the paradigmatic crisis of modern cosmology.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means that for decades now, the 2 great pillars of 20th century physics, quantum mechanics, or QM, which governs the tiny world of particles.
Right, very small.
And general relativity, GR, which governs the huge world of stars and gravity, they have remained stubbornly incompatible. They just don't work together.
The equations break down when you try to unify them.
Completely. The math just falls apart. But the crisis goes deeper than that. The prevailing materialist worldview, that the universe is a pre-existing machine and life is a byproduct, it fails to explain 2 critical anomalies that Lanza places at the very heart of his theory.
Right, what's the first one?
First, you have the famous, or maybe infamous, measurement problem in quantum mechanics.
I feel like we talk about this a lot. It's the idea that reality at the subatomic level isn't solid.
It isn't. It exists as a range of probabilities, like fuzzy wave function, until an observation or a measurement takes place.
So it's everywhere and nowhere at once.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
And the act of looking at the particle instantaneously forces it to snap from that potentiality into actuality. It picks a spot.
And the standard model has no idea why that happens.
It struggles deeply. What exactly is an observation? What constitutes a measurement? Does rock observing an electron cause the collapse? Does a computer sensor count?
That's the question that physicists have been battling over for 100 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
If the universe is purely physical, why does our most fundamental physical theory, quantum mechanics, require this undefined non-physical element, observation, to complete the equation?
Precisely. And the second major anomaly is the problem of cosmic fine-tuning.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
The idea that the universe seems tailor-made for us.
It seems conspiratorially fine-tuned. The materialist model provides no satisfying non-metaphysical explanation for it. When we look at the fundamental parameters of existence, the constants that govern forces, they appear set with this breathtaking, impossible precision.
Just right to allow for chemistry, stars, and eventually observers like us.
If this universe is just a random collection of particles operating blindly, why are the fundamental dials set so perfectly? It's a huge problem.
And the standard model, for all its predictive power in other areas, doesn't really have an answer for this. It has to bolt on extra, and let's be honest, unwieldy ideas like the multiverse to explain it away.
Exactly. So Lanza steps in and says, look, we've been asking the wrong questions. We're operating under a fundamental category error. We're trying to build a theory of everything without including the everything that is doing the observing.
So he proposes this radical inversion.
Think of it as a Copernican revolution in reverse. Copernicus showed us the Earth wasn't the center of the cosmos.
Right, he decentered humanity.
Lanza argues that while the physical location of Earth is arbitrary, the existence of an observer is not. It's the opposite of that decentering. Biocentrism says biology is the foundational science, not physics.
He inverts the hierarchy.
Completely. Life and consciousness are not just consequences of the universe. They are the necessary source that determines the physical reality we perceive.
So you're not in the universe.
The universe is in us.
That is the core inversion, and it's dizzying leap. To even start to grasp how Lanza justifies this, we have to look at his 7 core principles, the axioms of biocentrism. So let's start with the first one, which challenges our most fundamental assumption that reality exists out there, separate from us.
It has to start there.
Okay, so Lanza starts by tackling this subject-object dichotomy, the idea that there is me in here and the world out there. He says that the moment you assume that, you've made a profound error.
Yes. This first principle states that what we perceive as reality is a dynamic process. It's not a static thing. And it's a process that fundamentally requires our consciousness to crystallize.
So what we experience isn't raw external data.
No. It's a biologically filtered, synthesized reality. It's a construct.
Okay, we need to make this concrete, the classic philosophical problem. The tree falling in the forest. If no one is there to hear it, doesn't make a sound. Conventionally, we'd say, yes, of course, sound waves are physical.
Right. That's the standard materialist answer.
How does biocentrism challenge that?
It directly challenges that premise. It argues that sound is not the physical air pressure waves traveling through the air. Sound is purely a perceptual event that occurs inside the brain.
Okay, unpack that.
The falling tree creates physical compression waves in the atmosphere. Absolutely. No one denies that. But those waves are silent.
Silent.
Completely silent. Without the biological ear and the corresponding neural networks in the brain to translate those physical waves into the subjective, complex experience we call sound, there are only silent compression waves. The physical ingredients are there, but the phenomenon of sound itself is not.
So sound, color, texture, these aren't properties of the universe itself, but properties the brain adds to the universe.
Precisely. Lanza extends this to vision with the example of the rainbow. We instinctively treat a rainbow as a physical object, an arch located at a specific coordinate in space, maybe a mile away.
Sure, it looks like it's right over there.
But Lanza reminds us that a rainbow is not a physical object. It is a relational phenomenon.
Meaning it only exists in relation to me, the observer.
Exactly. It's created by the precise angle of light hitting water droplets relative to a specific, unique observer. If you step 3 feet to the left, the light rays change, and the rainbow instantly adjusts itself to your new perspective.
And if you and I are standing next to each other, we are literally seeing 2 different rainbows.
Made of different light rays hitting different water droplets. And if you close your eyes...
that specific rainbow, my rainbow, ceases to exist.
Correct. And here's the profound conclusion Lanza draws from this. All physical objects, your car, the distant stars, the desk you're at right now, are rainbows in this essential sense. They are raw ingredients, like light and energy, that remain undefined, existing only as probability, until an observer's mind synthesizes them into an image, complete with color, shape, and form.
So the redness of an apple isn't in the apple's skin.
It's an activity in your visual cortex. It's a quality your brain generates and projects onto the object.
Okay. If the outside world is fundamentally observer-dependent, that leads us to the second pillar, right?
It does. The division we feel between our internal thoughts, our self, and the external world must be an illusion. They're inextricably intertwined.
And Lanza has a great thought experiment for this, the dark skull problem.
Yes. He challenges us to consider where we are actually seeing reality. Subjectively, we feel that the room, the light, and objects, it's all out there.
Of course.
But every neuroscientist confirms that the actual perception, the fully rendered 3D model complete with motion and color, occurs solely inside the neural networks of the brain. You're watching a movie screen that is located entirely inside your dark, sealed skull.
If I try to imagine a candle flame, that image is created in my brain. If I look at a real candle flame, the image is still created in my brain, just using signals relayed from my eyes. The location is the same.
The location of the sensory experience is identical. Lanza points out that physiologically, the brain uses the same neural circuitry and processing resources to generate the 3D model of a real kitchen and a dreamed kitchen.
So the external reality I experience is functionally just as mental as my internal thoughts.
It is. The powerful illusion of an external, separate world comes from the mind's need to organize all the sensations into a stable, useful narrative for survival.
But wait, that's a key question.
Yeah.
If both are mental constructs, why is external reality so stable and predictable while a dream is chaotic and unstable? If I walk into a wall in a dream, it might hurt, but the wall can just disappear. If I walk into a real wall...
It hurts, and it stays put for everyone else, too.
Right. What's the difference in the underlying code, so to speak?
That's a critical question. Lanza would argue the difference isn't that the external world is made of real matter. The difference is that it's the shared, collective, and universally agreed-upon projection of what he calls a unitary consciousness.
So dreams are my mind running locally on its own.
And physical reality is the collective mind running globally. It's constrained by shared biological programming, what we call the laws of physics, that ensures consistency so we can all survive and interact. It's stable because billions of conscious observers are constantly running the same software and confirming the data.
Okay, the idea that consciousness is the ultimate reality check for the universe seems abstract. But Lanza grounds this in quantum mechanics with his third pillar.
Yes, this is where he argues that the behavior of all particles is inextricably linked to the presence of a conscious observer.
This is the jump from philosophy to physics.
It is. This is the critical juncture where classical physics, where a tennis ball has definite properties whether you look at it or not, breaks down, and quantum mechanics takes over. Subatomic particles exist in a state of superposition.
Meaning, they occupy all possible states at once. They're literally here, there, and everywhere else until we measure them.
Exactly.
Let's ground this. When you say superposition, are we basically talking about Schrödinger's cat, but for every single particle? The particle is both spin up and spin down until we open the box.
That is the perfect analogy. Schrödinger created that thought experiment specifically to show how absurd the implications of quantum mechanics are when you scale them up. Lanza just takes the Copenhagen interpretation, the oldest and most successful way of looking at QM, and follows its logic to the absolute end.
And the Copenhagen interpretation says observation collapses the wave function. It opens the box.
Right. But Lanza pushes it. He argues the collapse requires conscious observation, not just mechanical interaction. He critiques the idea that a simple camera sensor or a piece of rock registering a collision can turn possibility into reality.
So for Lanza, consciousness is the only thing that can do that reality crystallizing job.
It's the only non-physical agent in the equation capable of performing that function.
So the material world only truly solidifies when we look at it.
Yes. When you close your eyes and leave the room, biocentrism asserts that the objects in that kitchen, the stove, the table, literally dissolve back into probability waves.
That is a staggering thought.
They at best exist in an undetermined state of probability waves, just waiting for a conscious observer, you, a spider, a dog, to return and crystallize their material existence again.
So the physical world is momentary.
Crystallized only by our biological interaction with it. For Lanza, consciousness is the fundamental determining engine of physical form.
Okay, if Lanza is right, and consciousness is this crystallizing force, then the very containers we think of for reality, space, and time, they must also be fluid mental constructs.
They have to be. They're just tools created by the mind.
That's a huge claim. We intuitively experience space and time as these concrete, universal absolutes. How can they possibly be illusions?
Lanza argues they are the most comprehensive and useful illusions we maintain. They're the software that consciousness uses to organize the static flow of data into a coherent, navigable experience.
Let's start with time. That's his sixth pillar.
Yes. Lanza, and he's aligning with concepts that go back to Einstein here, states that time is not a fundamental feature of reality. It's a biological tool for organizing change.
The sixth principle. Time does not have a real existence outside of animal sense perception.
It's the cognitive framework we use to perceive and sequence changes. Lanza defines time as the summation of spatial states occurring inside the mind.
That still sounds incredibly abstract. If the underlying reality is timeless, how does the mind generate that subjective feeling of flow or duration? The sense that the past is gone and the future hasn't happened yet.
This is where his analogy of the movie projector becomes so essential.
Okay.
Think about a film reel. The reel itself contains thousands of static, frozen, individual images. These are the spatial states. They all exist simultaneously on that reel. There is no motion inherent in the film strip itself.
Right, it's just a collection of still pictures.
And when the projector, which is consciousness, runs through these static frames in a rapid sequence, the perceived motion and the subjective flow of time are manufactured illusions.
So the underlying reality, the film strip, is static and timeless.
And the flow, the narrative, the sense of causality is a cognitive construct the mind creates to organize these frames into a coherent story. If consciousness stops,
The projector stops, and time, as a linear progression, ceases to exist.
exactly.
But we only perceive time because our brains are designed to sequentially process these discrete moments of existence. The past is just a frame of film we already processed, and the future is a frame we haven't projected yet.
Precisely, and this implies that the common human experience of aging and the unidirectional arrow of time are biological constraints, not cosmic ones. In the underlying reality, all the frames exist simultaneously.
Okay, building on time as mental organization, the seventh pillar tackles space. It claims space is also not an independent container, but a form of intuition.
Like software the mind uses to keep the frames separate and organized. And this is where Lanza overtly draws on 18th century philosophy.
This sounds very Kantian.
It's almost a direct quotation of Immanuel Kant. Kant argued that space and time are not noumena, the world as it actually exists independently, but phenomena, the world as it appears to us, structured by our mind's capacity.
Lanza is taking Kant's epistemology and finding empirical evidence for it in quantum physics.
He is, and he claims the strongest evidence, the smoking gun for the illusion of space, is quantum entanglement.
Right, the spooky action at a distance.
Entanglement is crucial because it completely violates our deepest intuitions about spatial separation. When two particles become linked, they share the same quantum state no matter how far apart they are.
So if you measure the spin on particle A,
Particle B, even if it's 7 miles away, instantly assumes the opposite property.
Einstein hated this because it implies information travels faster than the speed of light, which violates general relativity.
And that's the tension Lanza exploits. He points to the 1997 experiments where entangled photons were sent down fiber optic cables 7 miles apart. When one was measured, its twin instantly reacted, at least 10,000 times faster than light speed. If the distance were real, relativity is broken.
So what's the biocentric solution?
It's cleaner, if more counterintuitive. The solution is space does not exist as an independent, separating entity.
It's just mental software.
A projection the mind uses to keep objects separate for survival. If that's true, then the particles were never truly separated in the underlying reality. The 7 miles is a feature of how our mind displays the data, not a fundamental cosmic truth.
They're non-local, part of the same unified object.
And that non-locality, Lanza argues, confirms that distance is merely a construct of the biological observer.
Okay, so we've established the fluidity of space and time in this model. Now we have to use that to confront the biggest logical hurdle Lanza faces.
The ancestrality paradox.
Right. If consciousness creates reality, how did the universe exist for 13.8 billion years before the evolution of the first conscious life form? How do we explain galaxies, rocks, dinosaur fossils that predate the first conscious eye?
This is a devastating critique for any form of idealism, and Lanza tackles it head-on with his fourth pillar. He asserts that the past is created in the present.
How does that work?
He states that the universe before life was only a probability amplitude, a maybe universe. Like an unobserved particle, it existed in an undetermined probability state.
So it wasn't a tangible, singular, concrete reality. It was just a massive potential field waiting to be crystallized.
Precisely. It only coalesced into a singular, tangible history, the Big Bang, star formation, the fossil record, when the first conscious eyes observe it, or more accurately, observe the evidence of it.
So consciousness is the first cause in a functional defining sense, even if temporally it seems like a late arrival.
Yes, and this idea isn't purely philosophical. Lanza connects it directly to the most mind-bending reality of quantum physics, the delayed choice experiments.
The ones proposed by John Archibald Wheeler.
Exactly. The delayed choice experiment is basically the double-slit experiment with a massive temporal twist. In these experiments, the decision made in the present, say, choosing whether to measure a photon's path or its interference pattern after the photon has already passed the choice point.
It seems to retroactively affect the photon's behavior in the past.
Yes.
Help us visualize that. The particle already acted one way, but our decision now forces it to behave differently back then.
That's the interpretation. The particle acts as if it knew how it would be measured, even though the measuring device wasn't even configured until the particle was long gone.
And Lanza seizes on this.
He seizes on this to argue that the observer in the present determines the reality of the past. The history of the universe isn't a fixed movie reel playing forward. It's an open script that is finalized by our current observation.
So if I look at a galaxy 10 billion light years away, I'm seeing it as it was 10 billion years ago.
And Lanza suggests your active observation is what finalized that past reality 10 billion years ago.
That is profound. Consciousness not only defines our now, but locks in our past. So consciousness determines space, time, and history. But we still haven't addressed the second major anomaly that got us here. Why is the universe's rulebook, the fundamental constants, so incredibly perfect for life?
Right, the fine-tuning problem.
This brings us back to that. Lanza addresses it with his fifth pillar, the anthropic solution. For anyone listening, the question is, how did we win the cosmic lottery?
The problem, often called the Goldilocks enigma, is that the physical constants are tuned with breathtaking, seemingly impossible precision.
And Lanza lists these as direct evidence.
Yes, not as philosophical curiosities, but as evidence that the universe is intrinsically dependent on the potential for observership.
Okay, give us the big ones.
Let's start with the strong nuclear force. This is the energy that holds protons and neutrons together in an atom's nucleus.
The glue of matter.
The glue of matter. If this force were just 2% stronger, all hydrogen would have fused into helium right after the Big Bang. No water, no long-lived stars like our sun.
And if it were weaker?
If it were 5% weaker, no atoms would form at all. Just a diffuse soup of individual particles, a tiny, tiny shift in either direction, and complex chemistry, let alone life, is impossible.
It's astonishing that something so fundamental is balanced on a razor's edge, but maybe the most shocking number is the cosmological constant.
Oh, yes, the cosmological constant, or lambda. This governs the energy density of the vacuum, essentially the outward pressure of empty space that drives the expansion of the universe.
And its value is absurdly small.
Its measured value is 10 to the minus 122. Let's just pause on that number. That's a decimal point followed by 121 zeros before you get to a 1.
It's hard to even conceive of a number that small. It's like the odds of picking a single grain of sand out of all the beaches on Earth, then picking that exact same grain again and doing that hundreds of times in a row.
The precision is just utterly counterintuitive. If that constant were even slightly larger, say, changing by just a few decimal places to 10 to the minus 120 space, would have expanded so violently that gravity could never have pulled matter together. No galaxies, no stars.
If it were smaller, the universe would have just collapsed back in on itself.
Balanced on the knife edge of nothingness. And then, for carbon-based life, you have another coincidence. The carbon-12 energy level, the Hoyle state.
Right, this is about how carbon is made in stars.
Yes. This resonance level is exactly 7.65 MeV, and that precise value is required to allow 3 helium nuclei to fuse into carbon. If that level shifted by just 0.4%, virtually no carbon would be created in the universe. No complex organic molecules, no us.
The sheer statistical improbability of all these constants landing perfectly, it defies the cosmic accident theory. This is why mainstream physics came up with the multiverse, right?
Right. To explain this, they say, well, there are 10 to the 500 possible universes, and we just happen to be in the lucky one.
But Lanza rejects that.
He rejects the multiverse as untestable, metaphysical speculation. He offers his biocentric inversion instead.
Which is?
The universe isn't a separate random die roll that came out perfect for us. It is a projection of our own biological and mental categories.
The constants are just right, because they are the parameters of our own existence projected outward.
Exactly. The universe is simply the complete spatio-temporal logic of the self, reflecting the conditions necessary for observation. It's an inversion of cause and effect. It's not that the universe tuned itself for life, it's that life creates a reality that inherently reflects its own required parameters.
You see a universe perfectly adapted to us because we are the ones describing it.
And our consciousness imposes the spatio-temporal logic that defines those constants. The only way to understand why the laws of physics are what they are, Lanza claims, is to understand biology first.
Okay, let's return to the engine of this theory, the quantum observer. We established that the double-slit experiment shows particles behave like waves when unobserved and like bullets when they're watched. Lanza has to be really specific about what is doing the watching.
For Lanza, the critical factor is information and knowledge. When the measurement device is on and the path of the particle is known by the experimenter, the wave behavior disappears. possibility collapses to reality.
So it's not the machine, it's the mind.
Lanza asserts that mere knowledge in the experimenter's mind is sufficient to collapse the wave function. He argues the information flowing into the conscious brain is the only necessary ingredient.
So the detector just generates the data.
And the consciousness then observes and crystallizes that data. Now, this is an extreme and often attacked interpretation of QM, but it is the foundation of biocentrism. The physical world has no definite structure until a conscious mind interacts with it.
And to bolster this idea that consciousness is an active controller, he uses the quantum Zeno effect.
The Zeno effect. It's sometimes called the watched pot never boils phenomenon. It refers to unstable particles, like decaying uranium atoms. If you leave them alone, they decay over a measurable period.
But if you keep looking at them...
If they are continuously observed or measured, they are prevented from decaying.
Wait, continuous observation literally freezes their state.
Yes, essentially. In quantum theory, frequent measurement resets the wave function, preventing the system from evolving into a decayed state. Lanza interprets this as direct proof of the observer being actively involved in freezing reality.
So a human analogy might be like obsessively watching a diet or a New Year's resolution. The constant attention prevents the decay of discipline. But if you ignore it, the system just evolves naturally into a state you didn't want.
That is precisely the biocentric takeaway. The continuous observation locks the quantum system into one static frame. Lanza states that to measure anything's position precisely is to lock in on one static frame of its motion. The observer literally freezes reality, preventing the system from moving toward its potential state of decay.
It suggests active control over the flow of change, which is the essence of time.
Exactly.
Okay, it sounds like Lanza is pulling ideas from 18th century philosophy and dressing them up in 21st century quantum language. That context feels vital because understanding this lineage helps us evaluate the critiques. A lot of physicists just dismiss this as philosophy, not science.
That's a crucial transition point. Biocentrism, while using modern physics language, is fundamentally a revival of philosophical idealism.
The idea that consciousness or mind is the origin of existence, not matter.
Exactly. Lanza's assertion that space and time are tools of the mind is purely Kantian idealism. Immanuel Kant, back in the 1700s, argued our minds have these innate fixed structures. He called them a priori forms of intuition that pre-organize sensory experience.
So we can't experience the world directly.
We can only experience the world after it's been filtered and structured by our built-in framework of space and time.
Kant argued we wear these necessary mental glasses. Lanza is saying biology supplied the glasses.
Exactly. He's taking Kant's epistemological insight, how we know things, and applying it to cosmology, the universe itself. And he also references subjective idealism, especially Bishop George Berkeley's famous line, esse est percipi.
To be is to be perceived.
Right. Berkeley argued that material objects don't exist outside of a mind perceiving them. Lanza just updates this by replacing Berkeley's ultimate observer, which was God, with a unitary consciousness, or the collective web of all life.
Okay, this brings us to a crucial defense Lanza makes. We need to clearly separate his claims from solipsism because my consciousness makes the world sounds very close to that.
And critics often accuse him of solipsism, the belief that only my mind exists. Lanza vehemently denies this. Solipsism says, the world exists only in my mind. Biocentrism says, the world exists in the shared unified consciousness of all life.
So a woodchuck or a spider also collapses the wave function.
Yes, he clarifies that they possess the necessary biological framework to contribute to the crystallization of reality. It's a collective effort.
And what about panpsychism? That's a really popular counter-materialist theory right now.
Panpsychism says consciousness is a fundamental property of all matter, that electrons and photons have some basic level of proto-consciousness. For them, matter comes first, or is co-fundamental with consciousness.
But biocentrism inverts this.
Fundamentally, Lanza says consciousness creates the universe. Matter is the product of consciousness, not its container. That distinction is absolutely critical for his theory to function.
Okay, that context helps categorize the theory. But now we have to confront the skepticism. This radical view has faced withering criticism from the hard science community. Let's tackle that counterattack, starting with the philosophical materialists.
The first major line of attack comes from people like the philosopher Daniel Dennett. Dennett argues that consciousness itself is not a deep mystery, but an illusion, a complex computational product generated entirely by neural processing.
There's no ghost in the machine.
There is no mysterious self watching the world. The brain just processes sensory inputs, and the subjective narrative we call consciousness is the resulting highly sophisticated user interface.
So Dennett would accuse Lanza of the Cartesian fallacy, wouldn't he?
Exactly. He'd say Lanza commits the error of assuming that because the brain constructs a perfect 3D picture of the world in our heads, the world must therefore be mental.
Dennett would say the brain is just an incredibly good simulator of a real physical environment.
Precisely. For Dennett, qualia, the subjective raw feeling of redness, or the pain of a stubbed toe, are fictional properties. Lanza's entire theory hinges on qualia being the primary undeniable reality, so the two viewpoints are fundamentally irreconcilable.
But Lanza does hit back on this, right? He points out that physics has nothing to say about subjective experience.
He does. He argues materialists are performing a circular exercise. They're using their own consciousness to create theories like physics and math that then deny the existence or primacy of consciousness. He states there is nothing in modern physics that explains how a group of molecules in a brain creates consciousness.
And he claims biocentrism is the only framework that treats that subjective experience as the fundamental data point.
Instead of an embarrassing anomaly to be explained away later, which is how he sees the materialist approach.
Okay, now let's turn to the hard physicists. One of the strongest critiques is that biocentrism is just fundamentally lacking in mathematical rigor.
This is the core argument from critics like cosmologist Sean Carroll. He's very vocal about Lanza's work. Carroll argues that Lanza is misappropriating precise quantum terminology. In standard quantum mechanics, the wave function, psi, is a precise mathematical object that evolves according to the Schrödinger equation.
And the critique is?
The critique is simple. Biocentrism fails to define life or consciousness mathematically. Carroll asks, if consciousness collapses the wave function, what mathematical space is life an element of? What equations tell us how it evolves? How do we quantify a woodchuck's capacity to collapse the wave function versus a human's?
Without a mathematical definition, it's not physics.
It remains a philosophical assertion, not a physical law you can test or predict.
And they also dispute the fundamental claim that measurement requires a mind. They talk about decoherence.
Absolutely. Carroll and others argue vehemently that measurement in QM does not require consciousness, it requires decoherence.
Which is what, exactly?
Decoherence is the process by which a quantum system interacts with a macroscopic classical environment. It's atoms bumping into other atoms, thermal interactions, environmental noise. A quantum system loses its superposition when it interacts with enough external matter.
So a brainless universe would still have wave function collapse.
That's the argument. The universe doesn't need a mind to become classical and stable. It just needs matter interacting with other matter. Lanza's theory, they claim, is thus redundant and unnecessary.
Okay, the second major critique, and this might be the most damaging to biocentrism's status as a scientific theory, comes from physicists like Lawrence Krauss, the problem of falsifiability.
Yes, Krauss labels biocentrism as interesting philosophy, but firmly not science because it is unfalsifiable. According to the strict tenets of science, a theory has to make risky predictions that could be proven wrong. If a theory explains everything, it predicts nothing.
So how could we ever prove Lanza wrong? If he says the kitchen dissolves back into probability waves when I leave, but my mind instantly reconstructs it exactly as it was when I returned.
The observable outcome is identical to a kitchen that stayed there the whole time.
There's no experiment you can run.
Precisely. If Lanza can't design an experiment where biocentrism would yield a different result from the conventional materialist view, then he hasn't proposed a scientific theory. He's created a tautology. He explains all observations by invoking an unmeasurable agent consciousness that can never be removed from the equation.
And finally, there's the charge that Lanza is just using consciousness to fill in the blanks where physics fails.
Neurologist Stephen Novella calls this biocentrism of the gaps. It's like the historical God of the gaps argument. Wherever physics reaches a wall, the measurement problem, the origin of the Big Bang, the fine-tuning problem, Lanza just inserts consciousness as the explanation.
And Novella argues that this is an argument from ignorance, not evidence.
Right. Just because Lanza can explain these mysteries by saying consciousness did it, that in no way constitutes a robust, testable scientific theory. Physics is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
Filling gaps with a metaphysical entity now just means that entity will be squeezed out when a physical explanation, like a robust theory of quantum gravity, is finally discovered.
That brings us to the end of the analysis of the sources and the critiques. It's a fierce debate, and it really highlights this fundamental division in how we view reality. But If we suspend our skepticism, even for a moment, and assume Lanza is right, the implications are absolutely transformative. We have to talk about the most profound consequence, the denial of death.
This is the most compelling and certainly the most humanly resonant aspect of biocentrism. If space and time are indeed mental tools, biological constructs, then death as a termination of existence becomes impossible in any ultimate sense.
If there is no where outside of consciousness, you can't go anywhere. If time is just a sequence of thoughts, you can't end, because there's no linear arrow of oblivion that applies to consciousness itself.
Lanza frames it in terms of physics. Energy is never lost. If consciousness is a form of energy, the organizing force of the universe, and it's not bound by the physical confines of space and time, then it can't be extinguished when the biological vessel fails.
It just persists outside of the projector mechanism.
Potentially returning to the unitary consciousness that underlies all reality.
This also touches on the far-out science fiction concept of quantum immortality.
Exactly. Lanza leans on the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics here, where every quantum possibility actually occurs in a different parallel universe.
Okay.
He suggests that at the moment of death, when the observer's wave function collapses from an external perspective, the consciousness simply shifts or continues in a branch of the probability tree where they survive.
So death isn't an end.
It's interpreted as a reboot that leads to all possibilities within the framework of the timeless unitary mind. Your personal awareness can never experience non-existence, only continuous branching into new states.
It's an audacious attempt to dethrone the materialist paradigm. It synthesizes the bizarre reality of quantum mechanics, the mystery of fine-tuning, and these ancient concepts of philosophical idealism. It creates a universe where life isn't an insignificant spectator on a tiny blue dot,
but truly the director, the defining logic of the cosmos.
And that really is the final synthesis, isn't it? Biocentrism is most valuable because it forces us to confront the blind spot of modern science, the failure to account for the observer.
Yes. Even if consciousness doesn't literally create the electron we speak of is fundamentally a concept shaped by human consciousness, constrained by our biology and our need to organize reality through space and time.
So a final provocative thought for our listeners to take away.
I want to leave you with one, building on the implications of that seventh pillar, that space is an illusion confirmed by entanglement. If distance is merely a construct of your mind, what does that imply about the connection between any two people or objects you perceive as being far away right now? If the underlying reality is truly non-local, the physical separation you feel from another person or another galaxy might be the most comprehensive illusion your mind maintains. It means, in the reality beneath perception, everything is instantaneously connected, something to mull over until our next deep dive.
That is a perfect place to leave it. The idea that separation itself is a mental trick. If this radical inversion of reality has intrigued you and you want to continue challenging your assumptions about the cosmos, make sure to subscribe. New episodes of The Deep Dive drop every Tuesday and Friday.